Welcome back to a Father's Rights podcast with Chris Jackman. In today's episode, we are going to address the entire purpose of this podcast, the entire purpose of this law firm, a Father's Rights law firm. And we're going to talk about whether I think it's actually true that fathers and men in general have a disadvantage simply because of their sex, their gender, of going into a courtroom. And the reason why I bring this up is because over the past dozen years that I've been doing this, I've had countless men, countless fathers tell me that they believe that the system is against them, or that somehow the deck is just completely stacked, not in their favor, and towards their wife or towards the mother of their children or child. And they seem to have this belief that gender still, even today, really matters and makes a difference. I want to talk to you about that, as well as give you some tips on how, if that is true, and I'm not sure it is, but if it is true, how you can get around that and how you can lessen the impact of that. So first question is it true that simply because you're a man or simply because you're a father to your children that there's a presumption, and that's often what I hear, is that men feel like when they go into court against their ex, that they are just going uphill from day one, that there is an uphill battle they have to fight because the judge comes into the case already with some sort of presumption that they are the lesser parent, that they are the lesser parental figure in their child's life, and that just by default, the mother is going to be the better caregiver of the child. And by the way, just as an aside, for the most part, in any kind of case involving custody, it's going to involve a judge. I know sometimes when you watch the TV shows and the movies, there's a jury that'll decide the case. But outside of Texas, which, believe it or not, actually does have a jury, in some cases decide family law issues, including custody, for the most part, in every other state that I'm aware of, it's a judge. So there's pluses and minuses to that. You would think with the judge, because it's not going to be real likely that you're going to come across a judge who doesn't have many, many years of experience, as a judge in the first place, but before they were judges, they were lawyers, obviously. So, with that in mind, is it likely that you're coming into a courtroom with some sort of really meaningful implicit bias against you as a man that's going to really make your life harder and make it more difficult for you to gain custody? I've had this discussion with other lawyers many times over the years, and I was a little surprised when I brought it up because I actually do get a fair amount of lawyers who believe that's still true, that here we are halfway almost through the 2020s, and that there's still this presumption. And obviously it goes back to what's been around in our society for eons now, right? That the mother raises the child and the father goes out and hunts and gathers and provides for the family. And therefore, somehow the extension of that is that the father is the lesser figure. It seems that according to some lawyers I've talked to, that bias is still very much alive and well. I will push back against that a little bit and say that I don't necessarily believe that to be true. But I think it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies that if you come into the courtroom with that belief, then you automatically almost begin to see that. You begin to see that pattern, and you can't unsee it. It's kind of like the old analogy when you're looking to buy a particular kind of car, that when you're out, you tend to see that car everywhere you go. Right? Because your mind is sort of predisposed to believe that car is everywhere. And that's what I've noticed with a lot of my male clients over the past decade, is that since that belief is so firmly held, if a ruling that a judge makes is not in their favor, it's not the evidence, it's not the particular law that may be applied, it's just the gender, right? That sort of supersedes everything else that's going on in the case. And that's what I've tried to frankly caution my male clients about, is that I don't think for the most part you're going to get judges who are that sort of blind and biased towards a gender. I think a lot of times what it is that the evidence, the law in the case just isn't as favorable towards the man in that particular kind of case as it is towards the woman. So I think that's really what you're dealing with. And it can be very difficult to try to communicate that to a male client and make them understand that, the deck isn't always stacked against you. It very well may be just that the evidence and that the other party, in this case the wife or the mother, just has better witnesses, or they have more evidence to support their case. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today is that, and to some extent, even if we're to suppose that it's completely true, that you as a man are going into the courtroom with the deck stacked against you, well, then the question becomes, so what? And how do you get around that? How do you overcome that burden and get over that hill? And number one that I can tell you that is the best tip I tell people, and this is a relatively recent tip I'm telling my clients, is to leverage social media in a way that's going to help your case, right? Because if it's true that you as a man or as a father are presumed to be the lesser parent, you've got to be able to come up with strong evidence to show that you really are an active parent, that you really are engaged, that you really want to be a father to your children. How do you do that? Well, in some ways, the easiest way to do it is just post on social media, right? Every time you have, assuming you're able to see your child and have visitation, whether it's on the weekends or the evenings, you need to be able to produce photographic evidence. And the reason why I say photos and the reason why it lends itself to social media is it's just easy to put it on social media as opposed to keeping it in your phone, right? And I say photos because videos are difficult. It can be difficult to allow videos into evidence unless you're at trial. So if you're at trial, sure, take the videos. But if you're like a lot of my clients, you're on social media anyway, you're posting a lot on social media, so why not take a picture with you and your son, or you and your daughter, or you and your children going somewhere, doing things, showing that you're actively involved? Because 9 times out of 10, that's the argument that I'm often getting from the other attorney, is that, hey, the dad's just not involved. The dad doesn't want to be involved. And so if the dad's not involved and doesn't want to be involved, why should we give him more custody, right? Well, if you can produce 50 photographs that show you, spending time with your children, doing activities, that's going to be proof that that's simply not true. So I would say first thing is document your relationship with your child or your children. Social media is an easy place to upload that. Number 2 are witnesses. As you can imagine, when it's a he said, she said in front of a judge, as hard as it is for you to probably wrap your head around the fact that your ex may be every bit as credible as you, the tiebreaker, so to speak, in a he said, she said, are the witnesses. And when I say witness, I'm using that term very generally. These people could be coworkers, these people could be neighbors, obviously your family and friends count as well. But I would say to some extent, people that are as disinterested as the interested people in your life. So again, the coworker or the person that you, play soccer with on the weekends and sees you with your children, those people can be every bit as valuable as your brother or your father in being able to write about what they've seen and what they've observed from you as a father, as well as just a person. Because unfortunately, a lot of the time with my male clients, what I get accusations of against my client is that they're not stable, or they might have violent tendencies, or they might have anger, problems. Well, if you can get these people who are willing to cooperate with you on your case and say the exact opposite, that can go a long way. And those folks, in my opinion, are invaluable in front of a judge, especially because the judge is going to look at these folks and say, hey, they've got no skin in the game, so to speak. They're not being paid to be here. They're taking time out of their busy day to support you and talk about the kind of father that you are, the kind of person that you are. So I think that is incredibly important, that you need to really take inventory of the people in your life. Who are the family, the friends, the coworkers, the people that you associate with that would be willing to help you out in your time of need? I know for a lot of men it's hard to ask for that. It's hard to ask that question, to see if they'll help, but you've just frankly got to get past whatever reservations you have about asking for help, and ask for help. The third person or kind of person that I think you might want to reach out to is a therapist or a psychologist. Because again, a lot of the time in my cases, I see accusations, some of them fair and some of them completely unfair, that my client has anger management issues or has, God forbid, domestic violence accusations against him, or things of that nature, right? And having a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist who's willing to treat you and write a report in your favor is critical. And I always tell my clients that, especially my male clients, that if you can get out ahead of that first, because sometimes a judge will order it, right? And that's the last thing you want. You don't want it to be ordered. You want it to be something that you voluntarily do and that you voluntarily submit the results of, so that way you can dispel any notions, any possible argument that you somehow have anger management issues, which could obviously really limit or impair the time that you're going to spend with your child. So to recap today's episode, number one, is the deck stacked against you as a father or as a man when you go into the court? Possibly. It's something that can be difficult to prove. Maybe someday I'll get around to studying the outcome of thousands or tens of thousands of cases and see if I can draw a pattern between the various genders of the people involved, and maybe there is some striking evidence that shows that one gender is favored over the other. But my argument is that that's really outside of your control. All you can control is the narrative, and how do you present the narrative in the best possible light to you. And I think it's those three things that I mentioned. Number one, document on social media. If you're not on social media, that's fine. Just make sure you're keeping track of these photos. Don't lose track of them. Upload them to the cloud so you have easy access to them, and make sure they're dated so you can show a chronology or a timeline of when and where you're spending time with your children. Number two is getting those witness statements. The legal term for these folks are called character witnesses or a lay witness, L-A-Y, a lay witness. Again, these are just people, family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, anyone who can talk about the kind of person that you are and the kind of relationship you have with your child are critical. And last but not least is that it may be appropriate in your case to bring on a therapist or a counselor, see this individual for a few months, and have them write a report. Hopefully that report is favorable and that report is attesting to your good nature, and have all of that ready to go by the time that you possibly have to go to trial or have a court hearing, so you can turn that over to your lawyer, and your lawyer can have Exhibit 1, 2, and 3, or A, B, and C, that really, really helps your case. I hope this is giving you a little food for thought. It's giving you some tips on what you can do for your case. If you're worried as a father or as a man about how the court system is handling your case, give me a call. I would love to discuss the options that we have for you and how we can best present your case to the judge.